You think pain is your enemy, but I'm here to tell you that pain is not your enemy. When I was in my early 20s, I was faced with the fact that I was losing my hair and I had a rash that was covering my body. There had been some slow hair loss at one point, and after a few weeks, I ended up losing about half of it in the shower one day, and over the next few months completely lost, or probably 90% of my hair. Wasn't bald as beautiful. This was nasty, peel your hair off the scalp at the roots, chip it away kind of nasty scalp. I didn't even think my hair could even grow back at the time because the roots of my hair had come off my head. I had a rash that covered my body, my face, my neck. I wasn't wearing, I couldn't even wear minimal makeup, which I wore, and just I found myself in a really difficult position. I was living in another country with very few friends, very few people around as a support system, but at the time a wonderful family that I was living with that was very kind and most generous. But in that period of time, they gifted me they took me to see a one-act play, or a monologue. I think it might have been 2 or 3 acts, but it was a 2 to 3 hour one-man play, all about. I can't give credit to who did it, but it was all about Father Damien on Molokai. This was, I want to say, in the early 2000s. I didn't know any of the story of Father Damien working with the lepers on the leper colony on Molokai in Hawaii, but I learned quickly, and I was intrigued enough that I began doing some research into leprosy. I didn't know much about it. I'd read about it in the Bible, and I had my assumptions about what it was, but I didn't know really what leprosy was. And let me read you what I concluded at that time. So leprosy is caused by a bacteria that primarily affects our peripheral nerves, and if left untreated, it can cause permanent damage to a person's skin, nerves, limbs, and eyes. Although the disease itself does not cause people's body parts to fall off, a person can lose their fingers and toes as the body's defenses are compromised, and secondary infections cause them to become diseased. Because a leper's extremities are numbed, they cannot feel pain. Therefore, they might walk for weeks with a nail in their foot or permanently damage their foot because they're unaware of it. Or they might put their hand on a hot stove and only remove it when they smell the flesh burning. Lepers don't feel pain, and the cost is great. Now, what I'm here to tell you today is that pain is not your enemy. And one of the things I want you to think about, and I'm going to share as I develop this thought a little further, is that it has been said that the amount of pain you can tolerate is in direct proportion to the amount of success you will realize in life. And so I was in a very painful situation, mostly emotional, and I was looking at my body falling apart at the age of 23. And I went to see this play about lepers, and I was very curious, and so I began to study a little bit, or I dug into it, what was leprosy about, and it really caught my attention that leprosy was rooted, the issue of leprosy, the disease, is rooted in the fact that lepers cannot feel pain, and there's a numbness in their extremities. And so they are in danger of losing those extremities because they can't sense pain or tell when something has happened. And oftentimes, if they're not even looking over their limbs, if they walked in a way or had something in their shoe and don't look at it for a long time, they can find out too late because they obviously can see if there's an issue, but they don't feel it. And so they have to assess their body to protect it in ways that most of us don't have to on a regular basis. But the issue with leprosy is there's a numbness. There is an inability to feel pain. And so I remember when I was going through this, I began to question, what if this is not the worst thing that could happen to me? What if this is the best thing that could happen to me, is that I experience this now? And if I didn't deal with these root issues, I might end up facing cancer when I'm 40. And so reverse engineering that, it was trying to embrace the pain of what I was dealing with, and try and figure out if these were warning signals that my body was giving me that there was other issues going wrong. What were the deeper issues? Now, I saw a lot of different, I saw a number of different doctors. They all gave me their different diagnosis. There seemed to be discrepancies between them. That was kind of frustrating. But even with that, I was just given medications, and there was never anything looking to the root issue of what I was dealing with. And so I ended up going and hiding out. It was 5 or 6 months later, after I'd basically lost all my hair. This rash was covering my body, and I hid out in northern Alberta in Canada, and had a chance to work on a ranch with another family. And I went there and was, at that point, I was taking a number of the medications I was given. It was coal tar to be put on your head every night. It stunk like nothing else, and it stained everything. And I wore it under a shower cap, and then I'd have to wash it off every morning. And so it was very much a ball and chain. Up to this point, I'd done a lot of mountaineering and outdoor work. And so, you know, to have that, it looked pretty limiting. Like my career and work in the industry was not going to be very, wasn't going to go very far if this is what I had to do every morning of my life for the rest of my life, right? And so I ended up, while I was there, I just began to explore. I wasn't satisfied with the answers I got from the doctors. And so I started doing a lot of digging and research, and I came to the conclusion that one of the the issues, the roots that I was dealing with was anxiety and stress, that my body, that there was just, there had been a lot of stress in my life over the last couple of years traveling as I had, and that I needed to really ground myself and really find a way to de-stress a lot of stuff. There was a few other things, but you know, I may or may not share those at another time, but that was one of the main things. And so over the course of the next 6 or 8 or 9 months, I began to just look at building really basic building blocks into my life, of getting really solid sleep and waking up at the same hours and eating really clean. I did colon cleanses, and I did fasting, and I did a lot of juicing, and I ate a lot of vegan and vegetarian to some degree, but just really clean foods and meats when I did eat them. Anyway, at some point, I remember seeing one of the most renowned doctors in Canada, a dermatologist, and his conclusion was ultimately that I had dermatitis on my scalp and eczema on my skin, and he just basically said flat out that if this was a disease I would have for the rest of my life, and basically the only way to deal with it was to manage it, and that these were the options. And if I was not satisfied with the coal tar treatment, that he could give me a peanut oil base that at least wouldn't be every day, and maybe only I would apply every 2 or 3 days, and maybe didn't stink quite as bad or stain things to the extent that it did, the other did. And so as I walked this out, I ultimately chose not to go that route, and I ended up stopping taking the medications I was taking. And over that winter, what I started to see was this cycle of things would get better and better, and then worse and worse and worse, and then better and better, and worse and worse and worse. And what was interesting is these cycles got shorter and shorter. And I began to watch as my body, I'll say, healed itself. And it was a really profound thing to watch as I gave my body the building blocks to do that. And I just really began to de-stress a lot of where I was at in my life. Now, it ended up being another year or two before I would say that, you know, my hair started growing back the following year, but it wasn't an easy thing. It was kind of something I walked out over the next 2 or 3 years. But to this day, you would never know that I had lost all my hair or that I had a rash covering my body. And I haven't taken those medications pretty well since I left Canada. It was a little bit of a rocky road as I kind of came through it. And I did resort to those medications a little bit at times, but it was only in that first year or two afterward. But ultimately, have come through the other side. But the whole point that I share this story is that this idea that what if pain is not your enemy? What if pain is a gift? How can you look at the pain that you're facing, whether that's physical pain, emotional pain, relational pain, spiritual pain? What if, I don't know who said it once, but there was a phrase years ago that said, pain is nature's warning signal to get busy. And the fact is we live in a culture that wants to avoid pain at all costs. We think that happiness is ultimately, it's great to desire happiness and joy in our lives and peace, but we live in a culture that we live as if pain is a horrible, terrible thing. We don't see any value in pain or suffering. And you can just look at whatever the modern statistics are. The statistics are this year, for the amount of painkillers that are sold and the opioids that people choose to deal with the pain that they're dealing with. And what I want to invite you to consider today is how pain enables you to survive by protecting you, by stimulating you to consider changing what you're doing. And if you just medicate the pain, if all you're doing is medicating the pain, then you're staying in the same situation rather than looking at this as a warning system that something needs to change in your life. And if it doesn't, you're on a bad track, right? Like you're on a crash course with something. And so take stock, look at your life. And, I'm not meaning to condemn or judge. I know there's people that need to use painkillers in certain ways. I'm not knocking all of them. Pain to a leader is like deep roots are to a tree. That the pain that they've had and experienced is incredibly grounding. And for most people brings an incredible amount of humility in life and affords them many opportunities for deep compassion and to connect with people and make change. And so if you want to be a history maker, if you want to be a world changer, or change your family or change your community and be an influencer, if you want to influence anyone, even your children, your employees in business, your classroom at school, understand that the pain you're facing is not something to run from. It might be hard to run toward the pain, I get that. But if you can hold that pain and imagine that maybe it's a gift, and it's a gift that will help you bring change in your life, you'll be amazed at how far you'll go and what you'll be able to do. This is Andrea Brown with Thrival Now, a new YouTube channel where I'm committed to helping you go from survival to thrival in your health, wealth, and relationships. Please like, subscribe, or share this video, and I'd love to hear your comments on it and your thoughts, whether you agree or don't agree. But thank you, more than anything, for sharing your time with me today.